Okay. Am I on? Is it on? Is it on? Okay. Let's get started. We are definitely going to start with prayer. So let's pray a second. Dear God, thank you that we have all come to chapel today together. I pray that whatever has to be said, Lord, can be said, and that whoever needs to hear it can hear it, and that all together we can grow as a community together at unity. In your name, amen. All right. So those of you who don't have me as a teacher, I'm Mrs. Vendung. Those of you that do have me, hola. So when Mr. Byman asked me if I would be willing to talk about my eating disorder, I was like, heck no, because that's like asking, remember that time you got hit by a car? Let's relive that over and over again. It's not something you want to think about all the time. But then God did that thing where he pulls out his poking finger and he's like, I think you have things that you can share, both about an eating disorder and just mental health in general. Because when we were listening to that panel discussion a few weeks ago, lots of things rung true when I was thinking about my eating disorder because it is a mental illness. And so I thought, you know what? I think I have things that God probably wants me to share. So here I am. All right, so first of all, before I start talking about my story, there's some myths I think that we need to break about an eating disorder. First of all, that it is something that teenage girls get. Number one, I got my eating disorder when I graduated from Dordt. So I was 22, 23, and I had it until I was 40. So that's nowhere near being a teenager. It was most of my adult life up until this point. So it's not necessarily teenagers who get eating disorders. The other thing, girls. It's not just girls who get eating disorders. Probably the majority are female, but there are also males who get eating disorders. When I went to treatment, there was a teenage guy who was there, and there was also an adult guy that was there. So there are guys who get eating disorders. And we'll talk about later, but even if you don't have the eating disorder, it can influence a lot of lives. And so your life might be influenced by it. Another myth is that an eating disorder is a choice. I'm just choosing not to eat. So you tell somebody with an eating disorder, why don't you just eat? Just eat. Because it's not a choice. Somebody doesn't decide, I think I'm going to get an eating disorder so I can get skinny. When I got my eating disorder, getting skinny, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was a really normal teenager. I had lots of friends. We hung out. I ate junk food like everybody else. I never thought, I think I might get an eating disorder or whatever. And I didn't get mine, like I said, until after I graduated from Dordt. And I'll explain how I got it, but it's not a choice. It's not a decision you make. It's a mental illness. When I went to treatment, my doctor told me there's actually research that's being done that says it might be a gene, it's genetic. So you could have the eating disorder gene, and something happens in your life, whether it's losing a certain amount of weight or another trigger, and all of a sudden it clicks on, and all of a sudden you have an eating disorder. It was no choice of your own, it just happened, which is kind of what happened to me. Again, I'll explain a little bit. The other thing is that God always has a story to tell. So like I said, it's not something I like to think about. Lots of things happened with my eating disorder that my eating disorder made me do that it's not happy thoughts. It's not what I like to think about. But God works his story through everything. And though I don't wish it on anybody ever, not my worst enemy. But when you can see God working, that's when there's redemption in the bad things, right? So even though the bad things happen, if we can find where God's in there, that's what we have to focus on. All right. So I Google searched, I think flesh-eating devil or something like that, and I came up with this picture. So an eating disorder, when you say you have to fight your eating disorder, that's such a vague thing. What's an eating disorder? Am I fighting my brain? Am I fighting food? What am I fighting? So when I went to treatment, they told you, don't think of it as your eating disorder, think of it as ED. Those of you that aren't catching that, eating disorder, ED, ED. So instead it becomes a person. So when I think about my eating disorder, that's just a vague term. But when I think about Ed, I want to wring his neck, punch him, kick him in the balls. I'll do anything to get rid of Ed. I'm not kidding. You can do that. And I would like to drop kick him over a cliff. That's how I fought my eating disorder. I could visualize a person, and we're fighting, right? I'm getting rid of you any way that I can. So I'll refer to it as Ed instead of my eating disorder. That's why. All right. So my eating disorder started when I graduated from Dordt. I moved to Nicaragua to teach down there. I loved it. It was the best 4 years of my life. But that's where I found Ed. So what happened for me, that whole genetic thing really rung true for me because, like, the first year was very stressful. The first year of teaching is stressful in and of itself. But then you add on the fact that you're in a different country. The food is different, the language is different, the people are different. And I started, not that I was watching what I ate, but it was weird food. Like, so I was kind of careful with what I ate. They drink pop all the time, like water, and so I decided to just cut out pop, so I wasn't drinking pop anymore. And all of a sudden, like, I started thinking more about my food, like eating that or not eating that, or I started counting calories. I never counted calories before. Like, I didn't even know, like, I didn't care about calories. But all of a sudden, I started counting calories. And it just looked like maybe the first picture of Ed should just be like a used car salesman. Not against used car salesmen, but he looks nice and he talks big game and he makes you feel really good and he makes you want what he's got. Pats you on the back when you make good decisions. That's kind of what Ed was like at first. Like, you starting to lose weight and you're like, wow, this is kind of nice. This is good. I don't mind doing this, even though it was never like I never wanted to lose weight before. Like, I was fine. But all of a sudden I just did. And then he just seeps in, right? Starts getting in where you never expected. And so like I said, I started counting calories. I started being careful with what I ate, and I started making rules, like food rules. I couldn't eat this. I couldn't eat this in the morning or in the afternoon, but I could eat it at night. I had to run a certain amount of time before I could eat anything. It was all kinds of rules like that I just started making. And the longer and longer it went on, the more rules I had. Like, when I was in treatment, I just decided I'm going to write out on all the rules that Ed gave me to have. It was a page long, more than a page long, of all these different rules. Like, I never ate meat. That was bad. I only ate vegetables at lunch. I never ate anything with fat in it. Fat-free was like, everything was fat-free. I ate fat-free hot dogs. I don't recommend it. But everything was fat-free. If it was fat, then it was okay. So there was all these different rules. Like, if I was going to Pizza Ranch at night, like my family was going, I had to run double what I normally do in order to kill all the calories that I would eat at Pizza Ranch. So it was all these different rules that I started to have. And I didn't realize what was going on. Like, nobody told me. It was a perfect storm. Because I was in Nicaragua with all these people that I'd never known before, right? They were like my family. Like, I love them dearly. But they didn't know the Rhonda before Nicaragua. So they didn't know that I didn't used to run 3 hours a day. They didn't know that I didn't used to not eat that, or that I always told them I don't like dessert. Like, I don't really like sweets. But that wasn't true. Like, I always used to eat sweets. Ice cream is my friend. But they didn't know so they didn't know what I used to be like. So all these rules that I had, for them, it was normal. So that didn't help the situation at all. There was nobody that could say, hey, there's something going on here, because they didn't know. When I went home for the summer, though, I remember this time, the first summer I went home, we got together with a bunch of college friends. And this one friend, he came into my kitchen. He's like, what happened? Like, where did you go? What happened to you? Because I had lost a lot of weight. I'm like, oh, I'm just eating healthier, and I'm going to run a marathon this summer, so I've been exercising. That was always my excuse. And it makes sense, right? It's logical. She's exercising. She's going to run a marathon. She eats healthy. And people were always like patting me on the back. I wish I could be as healthy as you. I wish I had as much willpower as you. And when you compliment somebody with an eating disorder like that, Ed is like patting you on the back. You are doing a great job. Makes you feel like, but as soon as you break a rule, if I didn't get in my full run, or if I ate something I wasn't supposed to, that was one of my rules, Ed would kick your butt. Like, in your head, he'd be like, you're worthless. What's wrong with you? Nobody's going to like you. You're going to get so fat. You might as well die. Like, these things were going on in my head. And I didn't know what it was. It just made me feel so guilty if I broke a rule that I would never break rules. That's what an eating disorder does. It's about control. It's not about food. An eating disorder is not about food. It's about the control that your eating disorder has on you. And the food is just a way to have the control. Because usually somebody with an eating disorder has some sort of, there's a trigger, right? A lot of people have trauma that they have to deal with. Like I said, my life was super stressful in Nicaragua. Like, I would get to school at 6:30. to plan for classes. I'd be in class. I'd stay after school to work on lessons. We'd go home to eat. I'd go back to school until 9 or 10 at night to work on lessons. It was busy, like all this stuff. So life was stressful. It felt a little bit out of control. So food became a thing that I could control, right? It was one thing that I could control. And as soon as I couldn't control the food, like I was breaking rules, then all of a sudden, everything fell apart. And then you felt guilty. And you have to go back to the rules. So when you just tell somebody with an eating disorder, just eat, they can't do that. Because if they just ate, Ed would pound them into the ground and make them feel worthless. So you can't tell somebody to just eat with an eating disorder. So anyway, 4 years in Nicaragua. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know I had an eating disorder. Never occurred to me. And then I moved back home after 4 years, and I married Benjamin J. He had no idea that he was marrying two people. He was marrying Rhonda, and he was also marrying Ed. And I know most of you aren't married, but you cannot marry two people. It doesn't work. But that's what it's like with Ed. It's like having an affair, basically. Because anything Benj would tell me, Ed would tell me something else, and I had to listen to Ed. So you can imagine how Benj felt, right? Like if you'd say, don't run this morning. Just stay in bed and rest. Like relax for a day. But Ed was like, heck no, you have to go running. So I would ignore Benj, listen to Ed, go for my run. Or, Benj would ask me other things, or I tried to hide food. I did this all the time because I had to follow my rules, right? Like I didn't eat meat. So for example, if we had spaghetti for supper, first of all, I always had wheat noodles because wheat was okay, white wasn't. That was one of my rules. And I would make, supper took forever to make because I'd have to make mine and I'd have to make my family's. So I would make a sauce that had no meat in it, and then I'd make a sauce that had meat in it. And then I'd put food on everybody's plates before supper so that it was all set out. I would have like 3 noodles, and I'd have all kinds of sauce because that was all vegetables, and vegetables was fine. I could do that. And then everybody else would have the rest, and I'd put it on their plate for them. And then I'd always kind of set the pans or my glasses or whatever instead of my plate because Benj sat across from me, so that trying to hide, I guess. I thought I was hiding, that he couldn't see my plate, so he couldn't see what I was eating. I did that all the time because Ed hides, right? He needs to stay in the dark because he doesn't want anybody to know that he's there, just you. He's very possessive, right? It's just you. So I was a very social person. I always had a big group of friends. We'd hang out, we'd do all kinds of stuff. But Ed makes you very isolated because, well, imagine if somebody asks you to go out for lunch, but I'm not allowed to go out to lunch because that's against Ed's rules, because restaurant food, I never know how it was made. So I didn't know what was in it. So eating at restaurants was very, for me. Anytime we went to a restaurant, I'd always look the menu up beforehand to see what was on the menu that I could eat. So people would ask me to go out for lunch. I'd say no. I'd make up an excuse. There was always an excuse. And I feel bad for my boys because they probably don't even realize what I made them do in order to do what Ed told me to. So every day we'd go for a walk. My boys I had this triple stroller. It was awesome. And I'd put the boys in the triple stroller, and then Isaac was my youngest. He'd be on my back in a kid backpack. So I was pushing 3, carrying 1, right? And sometimes we went on a walk every day. I remember one time there was tornado watches out, and we still had to go for a walk. And we got caught in a tornado. We had to go into a church because I had to go for a walk. Ed told me to, right? So I put my boys in danger because of Ed. Or the times where, they didn't even want to go, so I'd have to bribe them. I'd make, little snacks for them. I'd say, we just have to go for a little while. Just eat your snack. We'll go to the park. And they're like, no, we just want to stay home. I'm like, no, we have to go for a walk. Or friends would say, let's go. A friend would always call to see if we wanted to come over in the afternoon and hang out. And then we were going to have pizza for lunch. My boys would have loved pizza for lunch, but I could not have pizza for lunch. That was totally against the rules. So I made an excuse so that we had to go home for lunch. I don't even know if my boys realized that. I apologize. But I always had to listen to Ed, no matter what. So this went on for 17 years. And it affected Benj, obviously, because he always felt like I was ignoring him. He always felt like I didn't love him. And it hurt him, but I couldn't help myself because I had to listen to Ed. And I kept thinking, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm just being healthy, right? But I was hurting my own body. my systems weren't working. We ended up having to have all our kids through in vitro, which Mrs. Vince Gowan said some of you talked about the other day. If you don't know what that is, find out. But we all had to have our kids through in vitro because my body wasn't working correctly. So you can ask Micah sometimes what he thought when he found out that he was created in a test tube, with love, of course. But so that was one thing. And after, when I was in recovery, you have to deal with all that guilt, because was it Ed doing that or was it me? You know? And you have to separate the two, because it was Ed making the decisions, but at the same time, it's me, right? So mental illness is hard to deal with because it's you, but it's not you. So what Ed does is he takes your logic and he mixes it all up. Like, I kind of think he has big claws and he sticks them in your head and he just goes in there and then he like twirls everything around until everything's mixed up. Like, I had no idea. Like, it never occurred to me that I could eat without having to exercise first. Like, it didn't even occur to me. I remember one time while I was recovering, I asked a friend, but how do you know when to stop eating? Like, I didn't even know. I'm like, how do you not get fat? Like, I don't understand. She's like, well, when you're full, you stop. And like, she had to explain that stuff to me because it didn't make any sense to me. I could look at a plate of food and know exactly how many calories were on there and exactly how long I had to run to burn all those calories. Like, I can't do it anymore. I have no idea how I did it because I can't do it anymore, but I could do that. Like, I knew calories completely. So, like I said, this went on for 17 years. And then Bench had enough. He's like, I'm done. I can't handle this anymore. I can't deal with it anymore. He had a friend who was a dietitian, nutritionist, and he talked to her, and she's like, you know, I think she has an eating disorder. And Bench had no idea what to do. He's like, where do you go? Because nobody talks about it, right? Nobody talks about eating disorders or what you do to fix an eating disorder. So he started doing research. He found a place in Minneapolis called Melrose. Let me see where I'm at. Called Melrose, which is a place for treatment for eating disorder. And he made me an appointment. And I still remember the day he told me he made me the appointment. We were in the garage. I don't even know why we were in the garage, but I can picture us right there. And he told me, and I'm like, I got angry, or Ed got angry. Because when you try and bring Ed into the light, he gets pissed because he wants to stay isolated and hide. So when he said that to me, I'm like, no way. I am not going anywhere. And I said mean things to him. Ed said mean things to him. You see the difference? It's so hard to separate the two. But Ed said very mean things to him. I'm like, I'm not going there to get for an eating disorder. I'm fine. Like, I eat healthy, I'm fine. But he's like, no. And he tough loved me. He saved me because he tough loved me into it. So they told him, my appointment was on November 7, 2016. It was a Monday. And they said, she needs to pack a suitcase because we'll do an evaluation, and if we think she needs to stay, then she just has to stay. Like, so I went there not knowing if I could go home afterwards, if I had to stay, how long I had to stay. I had no idea. And for somebody who's control, right? That was a thing. I wanted the control, and they were taking my control away from me. So the anxiety was debilitating. Like, so I started eating more. I'm like, see, Benj, I'm fine. Look, I'm eating this. It's fine. Ed would let me because I was trying to get out of it. I'm like, I think I'm doing much better. And so in my head, I started thinking, when we go to Melrose, it'll probably be like a psychologist or something. So I'm like, I can talk my way out of that because Ed can talk his way out of anything, right? Because he knows how to manipulate and hide and lie. So I had it all planned out in my head. And the day we left was probably the worst day of my life because I said goodbye to my boys. They were staying at my parents' house. I'm like, will I see you tonight? Will I not? I have no idea. It was horrible. And I was mad, too, because it was November 7th, so it was the week of state volleyball. It was parent-teacher conferences. My boys had their first swim meet that Saturday. I'm like, there's all this stuff going on. I can't miss it. Like, you can't just take me out of my life and, like, I can't do that. But he's like, yeah, you're going. So we went. So when I got there, like, I thought it was to be a psychologist or whatever, but it was actually a physical doctor that I had to go see. And they did all kinds of tests, like a physical. So it really had nothing to do with this, because I was going to talk my way out of it. It had everything to do with this, which what your body shows, you can't hide that. So what the test showed, there was a bunch of different indicators. Number one, my heart rate. So they measured my heart rate. I was an EKG, I forget, whatever. So they did one of those to measure my heart rate, and my heart rate was 40 beats per minute. So that's less than 1 beat per minute. It was slow, right? They told me that if it had been 39 beats per minute, they would have immediately taken me to the hospital, because if your heart rate is that slow, they explained it to me this way, which it will make more sense. So if when you're pedaling bike up a hill, and then you get to the top and you have to stand up to pedal, and pretty soon you almost can't get the pedal over. They said that's what it's like for your heart. Your heart is pumping, and it could happen that it just won't make it to the next beat. Your heart could stop. And so if it had been 39 beats per minute, and they said when you're sleeping it probably is below 40, but that is like the cutoff for you need to get hooked up to machines so that we can restart your heart if it stops. So that was one indicator. The other indicator was, my doctor in Sioux Center told me I had Raynaud's syndrome. And they told me that was a very common misdiagnosis for people with anorexia. So my fingers and my toes would always turn white and go numb. Like I could do this and not feel anything. And that's what Raynaud's syndrome is, I guess. But they said for a person with an eating disorder, that happens because your body thinks that you're in starvation mode. Like that's actually a thing. So this part of your body with all your major organs, this is what needs to survive, right? You need this stuff to live. So getting blood to your extremities is not that important to your body. So it wasn't getting the blood to my extremities in order to keep me alive. So that's why things were going numb. So that was another indicator. Another indicator had to do with my blood, and I didn't understand that. Something was a wrong count or something, but that also told them that I had an eating disorder. So all these things went together, and so she told me, you have anorexia, and you have to stay. So it was the worst night ever, the worst night of my life, besides the night I had to leave my boys. I was crying, Benj was crying. They were just explaining, like, this is what's going to happen. So we went up to the 3rd floor of Melrose, which is where the intensive residential program is, the place where the people live who have to stay. They brought me to my room. They took my suitcase. They went through my suitcase in case I had any things that I wasn't allowed to have, because they had a lot of rules. Like, I couldn't have my razor, because you could hurt yourself with that. Any medications had to go through them, anything like that. So they went through my suitcase, took out what I couldn't have, give me what I could have. They showed me to my room, and there I was. Benj left. He drove away. It was horrible. And then I went to the community room, and I sat there, and there was other people there. I didn't know who they were. I thought they were weird. I didn't feel like I fit. I felt like a 10-year-old in a 40-year-old body, and it was horrible. So I was crying, and I just started writing an email home to friends. To my family, I'm like, this is what's going on. It was horrible. So anyway, that night I went to bed. And this is where I like to start talking about the story. All the other stuff is the bad of it, right? The hurt. And this is where there's a turning point. And now I can start telling you God's story instead. So the first night that I went to bed, it was a horrible bed, hard, bad sheets. And I don't know how, I have this image, but I can't give you specifics. But I know that God came to me that night. There was a light. I know there was light. And I know God was talking to me, but that's about all I can explain to you. But I know that he came. He's like, you have to be here. And it's going to be okay, right? I'm going to help you get through it. And he gave me this verse. Because Ed was all about messing with your logic, right? There's no truth in Ed. Ed is all lies. And so he gave me this verse, and this is the verse I repeated to myself over and over again. Because if all you're thinking about is lies, if Ed just messes everything up, the minute you think about this, God straightens it out. Ed might the next second mess it up again. You say this, and God will straighten it out. He will always straighten it out. And Ed is always fighting to bring it back to messed up. So that's the struggle with fighting your eating disorder. You have to take this all messed up ball of unlogic, illogic, and start straightening it out again, putting it back to place the way it's supposed to be. And that can happen different for everybody. It can take different amounts of time for everybody. There were people at Melrose, one girl was her 11th stay, 11th time in treatment. There was a lady there. I wasn't the oldest. Thank you very much. There was a lady there who was 63. She was like a frequent flyer. Every time she felt like her ed was getting too bad, she'd check herself in. She was a fantastic lady. I loved her. She made me laugh. But she couldn't get rid of her ed. Like, it's so hard to fight because ed is strong. He's so strong. And you have to fight it hard. It's a tiring fight. So I use this verse all the time. I'd be in the shower and I'd start reciting this verse, or I'd have to eat a food that I wasn't used to that was on my list. Ed dropped me to the floor when I did that, and I felt guilty again. I started reciting the verse. So you just have to fight this illogic with truth. And Melrose is a fantastic place. You need other people, right? You need people to help you because you don't see truth yourself. Like, I couldn't see it. There was no way that I could see it on my own. So you need people to help you start doing this. And slowly, hopefully you can do it on your own. So a couple of things. I'll just show you things that they did at Melrose to help me. So every night they'd give us a schedule. Like, this was my schedule for one day. We were always eating. We always joked. We had breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, supper, snack. So that's six. 6 times a day we were eating. And then after we ate, we had to go to the community room because people with an eating disorder, movement is our friend, right? You always got to be burning calories no matter what. So a rule there was after you ate, you always have to go to the community room and you have to sit. So I would do a lot of coloring, which is super like relaxing, like those, adult coloring. I've got pictures later. But I would do a lot of that, watching movies, anything to distract you from ed. So I didn't say this before. So I'm trying to explain how, what it feels like to have ed in your head. But if you go like this to yourself for a while, just do it. And then try and live your life. This is what it's like to have ed in your head all the time. You can stop. And he never quits, ever, right? So you have to live your life like this. So that's why, I feel bad for all the classes I had while I was teaching with my eating disorder because I wasn't giving them my full attention. I wasn't getting close to anybody because I always had this going on, right? I always had to think about, what's my next meal, or how am I going to hide this? Teacher in-service days were the worst because they always brought food in for lunch, and then I'd be like, crap, what am I going to do? Sometimes I'd hide so I didn't have to eat during lunch, so I didn't have to eat with the other teachers, or I'd only, trying to hide your food or only eat what you're allowed to eat around other people who can eat normal, and then try not to let them see that you're not eating normal. It's so tiring all the time. But if you don't, then Ed's going to be like, you're worthless. You can't even follow simple directions. You might as well die. Nobody's going to like you. That's what he's doing all the time. So what they did at Melrose is obviously the eating. We did lots of groups. Some of the groups were just to distract. One group we went to, we just did each other's fingernails, just to have something to do. Other groups, they teach you. I still remember the group I went to where I was sitting by the window, and I realized why I never went out with friends. That's when I realized how isolated I had become because Ed made me isolated. And that the light bulb going off, oh my gosh, that's why I never go anywhere because Ed's making me not go anywhere. So I was just learning things that I hadn't realized before. I had a therapist that I went to. Therapy is great. There's nothing wrong with therapy. Actually, I think everybody should have therapy. Because a therapist, I would go there. At one time, I ate breaded chicken for lunch, and Ed just, oh my gosh, double time, because I totally broke a rule, right? So I was on the floor, depressed, angry, upset. And I had my therapist appointment that day, and they know the questions to ask, because that's what she does, right? She asks questions. So this messed up logic, why, what's wrong with breaded chicken, right? Pull something apart. That there's stuff and then she'd just make me see logic. The best thing that my dietitian told me is you can have a sandwich and you can have 2 slices of pizza, right? Pizza, obviously, Ed says that's bad. But your body doesn't know the difference because both of those things, both of those meals are two breads. They're a protein with the meat on your pizza and the meat on your sandwich. They are a vegetable if you put lettuce and tomatoes on your sandwich. and there's sauce, like tomato sauce and maybe vegetables on your pizza. They're both a fat. Put mayo on your sandwich. There's fat. One fat counts for your pizza. Nutritionally, they have the exact same things, and your body doesn't know the difference. So that kind of logic, that's what started to help me to see that there's not good food and bad food, right? There's just food. There shouldn't be rules like that. It doesn't have to do with calories. What they taught me at Melrose was that, let me get to that in a second. This was the other thing that was a bad part of my ed was my exercise. Like, I exercised a lot because I was always burning calories. And my physical therapist at Melrose showed me this chart. She's like, this is what your body needs calories for. Like, you can lay on the floor and not do anything all day, and your body needs 1,500 calories just to do all of these things. Skin, muscles, flexibility, all that stuff, right? Like, I remember when I came home from Melrose, people commented on my hair a lot because my hair looked healthier. Because I was even something like that, I was sucking the calories out of my body and taking the energy even from having nice hair. So that was another thing that started pulling apart the logic for me, is this. And then calories, like I said, they totally took the power of calories away. Like I said, I don't even think about calories anymore. Like, they don't even matter to me. Instead, everything becomes a tally. So you need to have in your diet a bread, you need protein, you need vegetables, you need fruit, you need dessert. That was a tally. You need fat. Did I say dairy? Yeah. Anyway, those are your tallies. So you need to be able to figure out how much of that you need every day, and that's what you need to get into your diet. So when you first get to Melrose, there's 3 stages that you work through, and in stage 1, they plan your menus for you. They give you the food that they think that you need. Like, I think it was 3 days in, and my dietitian called me in for a meeting. She's like, you've been here for 3 days, and you really haven't gained any weight yet because your body's using all the calories you've been taking in just to heal. So we need to up the amount of food that you eat because we need to start getting you to gain weight, right? And I'm like, okay, let's do that. And she's like, usually when I say that, that's when people start to cry. But God had given me such peace about being there and about healing that I was ready for it. Like, bring it on. Let me eat. And it was okay. Not that it wasn't still hard, but it was okay because God said, we're going to get you better. You have to get home to your boys, get home to your family and your life. So this is just an example. I just put this up here. This was the snack menu that you could pick snacks from. But then you would know, like, you could have a banana, which is a fruit. You could have pudding, which would be a dessert, whatever that would fit into your tallies. This is just a better way. So I'll come back to more of Melrose. But so the first day that I came back was Thanksgiving Day. And they told me when I came home, when I was getting ready to come home, they're like, you need to stick to your meal plan. Because if you don't stick to your meal plan, you will fail. You'll be back here. Because if I need this certain amount of tallies or whatever in my meal, say Ed tells me, you know what, you really don't need to have 3 breads in your diet. Let's skip one today. And then the next day, you're like, well, I skipped that one yesterday, so I better skip it today. And then how about we just skip a fat? See where it's going? And then you get to the next day, well, I skipped it yesterday and it was fine, so I'll just skip that today. And then so that's how Ed gets back in. The only way that you're going to get rid of Ed is if you slam the door in his face, you lock the door, turn the deadbolt, put the chains on the door, push a dresser in front of the door, call out to the angels with the flaming swords and say, guard my door, and then you're inside with God praying to keep Ed out. Like, he will get in the sneakiest ways if you aren't careful. So that's why recovering from eating disorder is so hard, because you have to be on guard all the time. Like, you cannot let your guard down. It is tiring to recover, and that's why it's so hard. Because if you're not careful, like, he'll get his fingernail in the door, right? And then he'll get his finger in the door, and then his toe. And then if you're trying to shut the door, there's his foot, and he's just going to get in. So you have to be on your guard all the time to make sure that he stays out. So they told me, you have to stick to your meal plan. You have to stick to your meal plan. So I stuck to my meal plan. So the first day I came home was Thanksgiving Day. which, oh my gosh, the first day you have to feed yourself. But this is how I did it every night for almost a year, maybe 9 months. I would make, those are my tallies that I had to have. So I would start with breakfast. I say, obviously I had an egg, so that was a protein tally. Blueberries and strawberry fruit dip. I had 1 fruit and 1 fat. So I would go through and I would plan the entire day. I'd see how many tallies I got so that I made sure I had all of them by the end of the day. So when I woke up the next morning, I knew exactly what I had to eat. I didn't have to think about it. There was no question of, am I getting enough in? Because I had it all written down and I knew this was good, right? So I did this every day for sure 9-10 months in order to make sure I stuck to my meal plan. And that's how I slowly started peeling away from Ed. That was one thing. So back to Melrose, just to explain a little bit more how they helped. So stage 1, they planned everything for me. There was rules, because you have to have rules. Even like the bathrooms were locked, because obviously some people with an eating disorder use throwing up to get rid of things. So the nurse would have to unlock the door, and in stage 1, she stayed there with the door open. Maybe TMI, but that's what they did. And then you graduate to stage 2. And I got to stage 2, I don't even know how many days it took to get there. But in stage 2, you could start planning your own meals. Like they'd give you a list of the choices, but from those choices, you got to pick, okay, so I'm going to have this for lunch or whatever, and then you do this so that you have all your tallies, and they'd check it over, make sure you had it right. And then you graduated to where you could go down to the cafeteria downstairs, and then you had to order. Like, I remember the first time I did that, it made me super nervous, because I knew for lunch, like, say I knew for lunch I need to have a protein, I need to have 2 breads, a fat, whatever. But I had to go to the cafeteria. Instead of having it planned out, I'd have to look at the menu and be like, okay, I'm going to have a hamburger. That's 2 breads and a protein. I'm going to put lettuce, tomato on it. There's a vegetable. And so it sounds dumb, right? Because you're like, but for somebody with an eating disorder who's trying to learn how to eat again, that's how detailed, how specific you have to be in order to get back to where it's normal, right? Where eating is normal. So that was stage 2. The nurse didn't have to watch me go to the bathroom anymore. She just had to unlock the door for me. And then you went on to stage 3, and then you had other things that you got to. So it was kind of a progression. Most people, you can't say how long people were there. Some people were there for 6 months. Some people were there for longer. Some people, whatever. It just depended on how your body was responding to getting better. And since I was so determined, since God had said, we're going to do this together, right? You're going to get better. And I was determined. I kept telling the nurses, I'm not coming back. Like, I'm one and done, because so many people would return. So I'm like, I'm not coming back. Because I figured if I said it out loud, I'm not letting Ed hide anymore. Like, he's not going to isolate me or hide in my head anymore. I'm bringing it all out into the light. And that's why I wrote emails home to friends and family, because I'm like, if I tell you what I'm learning, then you can remind me later when Ed's trying to get out back into my head, right? So I was there for 16 days, which is a relatively short time for somebody to stay in the intensive residential. But I got to go home for Thanksgiving Day. That was my first day back. But when I came home, I had a therapist, a dietitian. I kept my meal plan, and it was hard. Like I said, it's tiring to heal from Ed because he does not want to let go. He wants you to keep the control. He wants to keep your logic. He wants to keep you under his boot. The best thing anybody told me was a lady, I don't even really know her that well. She messaged me on Facebook. She's like, I just felt God telling me to tell you this. She's like, we always think that Satan can read our minds, but he can't. He's not God, right? So if you want Satan to know something, you have to say it out loud. And I don't know if you've pulled this together. I don't. But Ed to me is Satan. Like, they are synonymous to me. So every time that he would start getting in my head, I would yell out loud at him. I'd be like, Satan, and I'd swear, because you can swear at Satan. It's all right. So I would swear and say bad words. I'd say, get out of my head. I don't want you here. You don't deserve my time or my attention. And then immediately I'd pray. I'm like, I need you right now, God, because Satan is being a pain in my butt. And every time I did that, Ed would go away. At first, it was just for 5 minutes. And then I'd do it, and it would be for a half hour. And then Ed would leave me alone for a day. And every time I did it, he would leave me alone for a little bit longer, I mean, he would still come back. I remember when I came back to teaching again, we were in the teacher's lounge, and somebody brought birthday treats. It was cheese sticks from Pizza Ranch. And I still remember because I was supposed to have a bread and a fat for snack. And so I had brought my snack along, but the cheese sticks were there, right? And the cheese sticks is a bread and a fat. I'll just tell you that because it is. And so I'm like, okay, I can have that instead of my snack. I'll take it home. So I was eating the cheese stick, and I heard another teacher say, I never eat those because they're so greasy and fatty. And all of a sudden, Ed, boom, right back. Like, he dropped me, like, because it was a good thing I had an appointment with my therapist that day after school because I needed it, because Ed just got back in. Anything can trigger. Like, it just triggers your Ed back on, and then he's back there, and he's telling you what to do. So you always have, like I said, you always have to be on guard against him. Am I going way too long? All right, I'll keep moving. All right, I just wanted to show you. This is the last menu I ever did. See how good, like, it became second nature. Like, I understood how to eat. But Tim, I did this one, and I'm like, you know what? I can do this in my head now. I don't need to do it anymore. So it was a progression. I learned how to do it until now I realize you can eat things, and it's fine. Like, I know how to eat, and I still don't think about calories. I still think about, that's why, like, I have a fruitette snack, because that's how I get a fruit in further during the day, and I put spinach and tomato on my sandwich, because that's how I get a vegetable in. So I kind of still think in the tallies, but it just all becomes food to me now. Another thing that I did to keep Ed in the light so that he couldn't get back in and hide is, I wrote emails home to friends every day while I was at Melrose. And somebody said, why don't you just start a blog? So I did. I put all those emails on my blog, and then I just started writing. Anytime that Ed would be like this, I just wrote out it, because I'm a writer. Like, that's how I process things. So I wrote a lot about how I was recovering, what it was like, things that I was struggling with, and then I'd post it onto my blog. Because I figured, for some reason, eating disorder is something you whisper about, right? Because I think we assume that it's not a choice, like she's doing it to herself or he's doing it to himself, but it's not. So it seems to be a shameful thing, but it's really not. It's like somebody with cancer or somebody with diabetes. It's just another illness. It's something that I caught, I guess, right? So I'm like, if I don't whisper about it, if I'm open about it, Ed can't hide because I'm not letting him hide. So I started my blog and I started writing on that. That was one thing that I did. These are just pictures from when I was at Melrose. We had craft night on Sunday nights, and the coloring that I did, and the fingernails, and my boys came to visit. We had a lot of fun. I think we were playing Would You Rather. This is a picture Benj took the day that I got dismissed. He took it as we were walking out, just to show, like, we're leaving. Like, it was the first time I had been outside in 16 days. It was awesome. All right. Now what? So, as we finish up, you need to ask for help right now. If you're during this chapel, like you're sitting there and you're scared or you're feeling anxiety, it's probably because your Ed is like, crap, she's telling you my secrets. And if that's the way you're feeling, then you need to talk to somebody after this chapel. Because if you even wait until after school, Ed will have convinced you that you're fine by then. So if you're scared or nervous or anxiety right now, then after this chapel, you need to come talk to me or somebody else. And we need to get rid of Ed, right? Because he gets in there deep. Like I said, 17 years. So you need to get him out before that. So that's my first thing. My second thing is that you might end up being a Benj, somebody who marries somebody with an eating disorder. So just because you don't get an eating disorder, because the majority of you won't, but you can be affected. If you're a friend of somebody with an eating disorder, it can be so frustrating, right? Because they don't eat. And you're like, just eat. That's what you want to say. Just eat. What's wrong with you? And they get isolated and quiet, and it can be so frustrating. But you can't give up. You cannot give up on your friend or your loved one or whoever it is. Because the minute you give up, they don't have anybody fighting for them. And this is all about community. This is a community fight. We have to fight for each other. So being quiet about it, like, I can understand how you wouldn't want to talk about it if, I don't know, keep it quiet, but the prayers of the people are powerful. Like, I can tell you right now, like, spiritual warfare is a real thing. Like, Satan's out there to get us. So if we're not fighting for each other, then he's going to get in there. So if you see somebody struggling, you need to say something. And then you need to stand by them even when their ed is getting mad at you, because I said nasty things to Benj, but he didn't give up on me, and that's why I'm here right now. So be the louder voice that somebody needs to hear, right? I still hear voices. There's the you suck at teaching voice when I have a bad day, or the voice that says, you're a crappy parent, you're doing things wrong. There's that voice. Or there's the, I'm getting really old, I've got gray hair and I have wrinkles and my leg hurts and I'm getting old. So I hear voices, but the difference between these voices and Ed's voice is that I have logic, right? Yeah, I had a crappy day of teaching. That lesson didn't go very well. I can change it and do something different the next day. Or I don't think I'm a bad mom. Like, I'm going to go home and give my boys a hug. I used to pick them up. Now they can pick me up and my feet dangle, but it's the best hug, right? If I love them, that's half the battle right there. I'm getting old. Like, I don't think I'm on my deathbed. I'm still moving. So I think I'm going to, and maybe I'm just getting wiser with age. So you got the logic to combat those voices. So I figure if I have voices and I'm 47 years old, that you guys probably have voices in your head too. I don't know. That person will never like me. I'm never going to ask them out. Or what do you do? Get their snap? I don't know. Whatever you guys do. Right? So you have that voice that's telling you this. You have the voice that says, I sat on the bench all season. There's no way I'm going to be good enough to play. Well, who says? Right? There's such a thing as practice, putting the effort in. Okay? Fight it with logic. Or the voice that says, I hear this one a lot. I can't learn that. I'm too stupid. Right? I can't do it. I hear my students talking. But who told you that? How do you know you can't? Maybe you've been listening to that voice for so long that it's become truth to you. But that's mental health, right? You need to get your logic. And if you don't have the logic to fight it, find somebody. Go up to your friends and say, why are we friends? And if they tell you because you're the prettiest girl in school, then they're not really your friend, because I'm pretty sure they won't tell you that. They'll tell you why. Because you're kind. Because you make me laugh. Because you help me when I know you're already busy with your stuff. You help me with my math homework, right? That is, we need to be the voice, the louder voice, to get rid of the other little voices that are trying to get at us all the time. That's how we get strong, right? We have each other to fight us. Because I love this place. I love you guys. I think Unity is the best place there is. And I think God is here with us, but that also means that Satan's trying to get in, right? Wherever God is, he's going to try and slither in. He's going to ride in somebody's backpack or come in with our feet at the door. So we have to be on our guard. So if being on your guard means asking your friend, hey, you know, that sparkles out of your eye today. What's going on? Is there something bothering you? Or, hey, you had a bad game yesterday, but this is what you did good, right? Or if you see somebody in the hall and you're thinking to yourself, oh, she looks pretty today, well, tell her. Why not just tell her instead of just thinking it? Say things out loud. That's how you get these voices out, and that's the whole goal. So that's my chapel. Here's some resources that if you need it. NEDA, if you want to look, there's a thing on there that will tell you some things to look for somebody who has an eating disorder. If you're worried about somebody or yourself, you can look at that. Jenny Schaefer has some really good books. And you can always text me or come talk to me. If you don't have somebody who can stop these voices, you come to my classroom. I will stop them for you. I'll give you a hug. I give good hugs. All right, so as we leave, this is just my prayer over you guys today, that you have joy, peace, wisdom, courage to face all those things, because I know it's tough. It's tough to be you, and that we can grow and have love in our community at Unity. So have a good day.